Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Freeze Peach podcast. Can you believe it? We have made it this far. We are podcast veterans. And it's me, Niall, with my friend and co-conspirator, Christina, and we're ready to take on capitalism. How's it going today, Christina?
It's going fine. It's a misty white morning here in Stockholm, Sweden. And I'm ready with a cup of green tea with roses.
And she's already putting in product placement. We know we're on a good theme when that happens. If you all cast your memories back, our dear eavesdropping audience, whether you be with us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or on YouTube, if you're slightly voyeuristic, we were talking about monarchy. Monarchy being sort of the classic idea of power and authority that we have in the Western world anyway. But we want to tackle a different form of power today, something that is a little more invisible almost. By invisible, I mean it's so ubiquitous that we don't even see it. It's everywhere, and so it is like the water that the fish is swimming in. It's not aware it's in water. But I thought it would be helpful if we thought about power first in its most primitive form. Christina, what do you think is the most primitive form of power?
The most primitive form of power? Leadership of some kind.
But how would you get leadership in the first place?
Oh, well, being a willful person, being someone who is fully ready to impose their will on other people, whether that can be positive and it can be negative.
Yeah, we're getting there. So if you were a very primitive, willful person looking to do some imposing, how would you do that?
How would I do that? How would I do that? I mean, if you are a willful person who's ready to impose their will on others, then isn't that will finds a way, kind of?
You're falling into the trap I've set for you.
Really?
It's an answer that's so ubiquitous and so obvious that you're near guaranteed to miss it. And it's violence. Power is originally installed through violence. The primitive man would have been the alpha male, and he would have attained his position at the top of the tribal hierarchy by being the most dominant. And I bring this up because in my
defense, I thought that was included in the answer of being a willful person, but I see your point.
The point that is relevant is that violence I need it all to stick in your brains that this is going to be a backdrop for everything we're going to talk about today. That at the end of it, if we all peel it back like a banana, you will find violence at the core of everything we're going to talk about, right?
Right.
So now you're now the caveman and you've clobbered the crap out of somebody and you're now the alpha. Now imagine you've been the alpha for a while, but your people are getting bigger, more complicated, and things are getting more difficult for you to just keep it for everybody in mind. You know, your club can only hit so many people, right?
Right.
What do you think you got to do to keep your power?
This is kind of a complicated question to answer.
It is indeed.
Right,
it's a hard question. Think back to what we did in our last podcast. It might give you a hint.
I mean, just convince others that you have a right to rule them. Is that what you're after?
Absolutely, yes. You need to come up with a narrative. You need to come up with some sort of story that puts you in the place of being the leader, and so that people will not oppose you. Because violence can only take you so far. If there's enough of them, eventually the threat of you clubbing them is not going to ring so much with them. They're going to there's 10 of us and one of you type thing.
Yeah.
So what happened after the alphas got their positions? They sort of merged their authority with primitive religion. And the religion gave them legitimacy. And so even whenever the alpha was no longer able through his own grrr to hold his position, people would willingly accept him and not seek to depose him. And eventually, as time went on, that emerged into monarchy, the divine right of kings, and everything we discussed last week. And
I just want to point this out that the concept of alpha and alpha males is a concept that is not relevant to humans. It's just it's not actually scientifically relevant, but it's right now it's just a rhetorical tool that we are using.
We're talking about, I suppose, the dominant class, the ruling class of people. What
I'm talking about is that people, especially a certain group of men's rights activists like to take this concept of the alpha male as something that is actually applicable to humans, but the whole alpha male things as based on wolves was something that was observed in wolves in captivity and not wolves in freedom. That's just an interesting anecdote for those that don't know. The whole concept of the alpha is actually kind of a misunderstanding, really.
Mm-hmm. Well, the point we're just making is violence was the root of power. Violence was reinforced by narrative, such as religion, which eventually evolved into monarchy, and that, of course, got the chop. When did monarchy get the chop, Christina?
When did it get it? What time in history?
Yeah, what's the wonderful time in history we love to talk about when monarchy really took a dive?
Took a dive?
Yep, it became not important. It became secondary, peripheral. It has guillotines involved.
Yes. You're talking about the French Revolution.
The French Revolution and the Age of Enlightenment, absolutely. Monarchy became totally irrelevant as a central part of the global order. It was when it started to be replaced by capitalism. Now, this is a strange topic to talk about. And the fact that it was so hard for me to build a narrative around this actually illustrates a certain point about capitalism. It's very hard to talk about. It's so ubiquitous, it's so in the background, and it's so taken for granted that it's almost hard to crunch it into a box because it is the box that you exist in.
Yeah.
So, give me one of your gut reactions you're so good at. What the hell is capitalism?
Ooh. Capitalism. I think of quantity over quality. That's what I think of when I think of capitalism. I think of people who are good at faking it and selling themselves and playing a role, are very good at selling themselves. They are met with success, and actual competence is pushed aside because what matters is quantity and fooling people into giving you money.
Indeed. That is definitely a part of it, especially modern capitalism. I think what you're thinking about is commodification. And
you asked for my gut reaction. There it is.
Yeah, it is. We will actually get to that in a bit. But a little bit more simply, capitalism is when the means of production are owned privately, as opposed to owned by either the state or a conglomeration of people, or otherwise it's owned by private individuals. And these groups of rich dudes are the capitalist elite. They are the people with so much undue power over everyone else who does not own the means of production. And if you think about it, it is the best definition I can think of for capitalism, because literally it means yawn people, little group of them, lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. Other people, large group of them, not very much stuff. What do you think?
Yep, that's accurate.
And it's at the end of the day, this separation between the haves and have-nots is backed by violence, which is why I brought it up at the start, where there's a lot, just like whenever the so-called alphas, the violent ones, instituted their power, they were stopped by narrative. There's a lot less alphas now and a lot more everyone else. So we could topple them with so little effort. And so a narrative has to be in place to stop us from basically trouncing them when we feel like it.
Yeah, that was the point of bringing this up, that the concept of alpha is fake for anyone that didn't get the point of it. It was to reinforce that the narrative has more bearing.
Yeah, so but this is what I found really interesting and hard to pin down. There is a narrative that keeps capitalism in power, but it's not so obvious as the narrative that did monarchy. Like with monarchy, it was religion. You deserve to be there and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. But with capitalism, just to show how hard it is, can you tell, what is the narrative of capitalism, do you think? What comes to mind? Why do people agree to this thing?
I think it's a very obvious example is the American dream. It's the rags to riches story, or it's the story of success, of getting somewhere based on your own merit. Except that that's not how it works. I think that's a narrative in place, isn't it? That the people who have reached success in capitalism have reached that success because they worked hard, you know.
That's exactly what I have written here. Why do I have such a smart partner? And
I'm so sorry.
Capitalism is run on this belief that you can get to the top, but you can't. It's a total fraud. The narrative is basically of pseudo aspiration. And
yeah.
When I looked into this, it brought me back to some of the other themes of capitalism. There's various types of capitalism, but I identified a few common basic ideas which kind of goes behind this idea of like the American dream. And the first one is selfishness is virtuous. This was pronounced by random weirdos such as Ayn Rand and other lunatics like her. But the idea is that somehow if you behave in a rampantly selfish way and consider nobody and just work totally for me and greed, that is somehow good for you and for everyone else. Like just try and wrap your head around that. No wonder they had to come up with a narrative about aspiration to make that sound reasonable.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that goes hand in hand with the argument that capitalists are stimulating the economy? Isn't that in line with that?
Mm-hmm. The idea that just more rich people doing stuff is somehow good for everybody.
Yeah, and the idea of trickle-down economy.
It always sounded kind of dirty to me. Trickled, like, I don't know, something nasty sort of coming down the side of your face. But the idea that selfishness is virtuous, greed is good, and all that sort of thing is really the fundamental myth that all of capitalism is built on in all of its forms. And there are several forms. So yes, I know if you want to go in the comments or whatever that I'm not specifically addressing type A or type B of capitalism. I'm just teasing out themes of which I think all of them share to a degree. We would be here for 16 days if we went through all of them individually. But you get the idea. Aspiration and selfishness come together in a strange version of the divine right of kings. We could almost call it like the selfish right of capitalism or something. It is the narrative which stops the many from trouncing the few in this case. Do you agree?
Absolutely.
How much do you think, I know in the UK and in America, these myths are quite strong. People generally believe that capitalism is your route to prosperity. Is that a view shared in Sweden and in the Nordic countries, which is often viewed as less capitalist than the average place?
Yeah, this is a very interesting person because in practice, Sweden is absolutely very capitalistic. But we also have a cultural sort of our cultural values are a bit different in that selfishness as openly shown is not something, I mean, it's frowned upon. And we have this like unspoken rule that you have to treat everyone as, having the same value, of course, that's a given, but like everyone has something to bring to the table, kind of idea. And you are not allowed to think yourself better than anyone else. That's like a big unspoken taboo, So the Nordic countries are a bit interesting in this regard, because it's almost like it's capitalism dressed up in like a shiny bow. It looks nicer, it acts kinder, but it has the exact same effect.
It sounds weirdly sinister. It kind of like it brings you a picture of like a beautiful little baby, like left at your doorstep. You lift it up, and it looks gorgeous, and you pull it away. It's actually like a goblin baby or something. It's so immensely disarming, and then once you've got it, it's like hooked into you.
Yeah, this is a complicated question, I'm finding that I struggle to actually give a full thought-out answer just right off the bat. Worth noting is that Sweden also have a lot of, inherited capitalists. There are a few families that are basically in charge of specific
capitalist dynasties, if you will.
Yeah, capitalist dynasty. That's the word I was out. I lost the word dynasty. We have quite a lot of them, and they hold a lot of power, and they kind of go unnoticed. Most people aren't even aware of that.
Crypto capitalists. They're quite common where capitalists try and keep themselves on the down low, because if they draw attention to themselves, that's more likely someone's going to try and go get them.
Oh yeah, actually the family motto of one of these dynastic families, the Wallenberg family, that
sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. Wallenberg. Anyway, their family motto is kind of like remain unseen or something like that.
It's creepy ass.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact words, but that was the gist of it, yes. And they are in charge of a huge portion of the Swedish industrial infrastructure.
Everybody just shh, we're going to stay in the closet and no one will know we're here, but we're going to own the goddamn closet.
Yeah, except that one former member as in he's dead now, is a very famous Swedish hero.
As you can see, capitalism, now I'm verging onto the real world practical end of things, where capitalism creates families that own lots of stuff, pass that stuff on to their children, and their family continues to own it. And it means you have entrenched inequality. Let's have a quote from an economist called Branko Horvat. He said, "It is now well known that capitalist development leads to the concentration of capital, employment, and power. It is somewhat less known that it leads to the almost complete destruction of economic freedom." Thoughts?
I think that hit the nail on the head.
It hits a pivotal part of our criticism of capitalism in that it promotes itself as the means through which opportunity is gained. However, in action, it shows itself as the place where opportunity is stifled. Those who have continue to have, and those who have not continue not to have. And your actions in the economy do not seem to matter. You can be the hardest working person in the world. You can have 3 jobs and basically work your backside off. You could still, in some places in the world, like America, still need government help to cover your bills. That is not an aspirational system.
Indeed, and this narrative of capitalism is particularly problematic and evil because at least during monarchy, the poor farmer had, within the narrative, a valid reason to be upset. But within the narrative of capitalism, it's like, oh, if you're poor, then that's it's your own doing. It's because you didn't work hard enough. And that's really something that stifles revolution or evolution, if you will. It excuses economic inequality.
The 2020 Credit Suisse Global Wealth Report told us all, to the chilling of all of our collective blood, that 43% of all global wealth is owned by the top 1% of people.
Indeed.
That is just a total, whoa, overkill.
Yeah, I know. And this is something that almost makes me so upset because I have such a hard time wrapping my head around poor people, or at least middle-class people who are in support of extreme capitalism. Are you aware of this statistic? And if you are you absolutely insane? It's so weird to me that someone would know about this and be okay with that. That's just beyond me.
That's interesting because that is an exact highlight of why capitalism needs a narrative. And it's even scarier that the narrative is so hard to describe because it's so in depth.
Yeah, isn't that what I just said? If you're poor, it's because you're not working hard enough. And if you're rich, even rich enough to buy the whole world, it's because you deserve it because you're a hard worker.
That's the interesting thing, is the reason why that narrative is necessary is because it disguises the reality of capitalism. People that support capitalism don't know what it is. They don't understand that capitalism operates using only the profit principle. It only has one function. And if you're into machines or computer programming, you know that when you make something, it only does what you've made it to do. It has no other means to solve any other problems. For example, if you make yourself a spade, it can only dig dirt. It can't fly, or it can't do anything else. Capitalism was only made to make money, and it has no other considerations. It does not consider whether that money is made fairly or how that money is made. It was only designed to make money. And this has to be disguised from people. And that it only gets away for acceptably making itself narrative fraud. It has no purpose other than to make money, regardless of outside consequences, or for goodness sake, even future consequences for profit making itself. Capitalist companies very rarely have the ability to look forward in 20 years to see what's better for their company then. It's so damn short-sighted about the next paycheck and the next way to make money, because that's all it can do. It can't plan, it can't dream, it can't do anything other than look for profit. And people don't understand.
Yeah, you want to hear a staggeringly stupid thing said once by a former Facebook acquaintance?
What?
This person said, my problem with, I don't know if he said socialists or left-wingers, but anyway, my problem with socialists is that they are against capitalism, not poverty.
Huh?
Yeah. I mean, excuse me.
Okay, where do you think poverty came from, a genius?
Yeah, when I pointed it out to them, they were like, yeah, no, that's not really true though, is it? I'm like, wow, it's interesting that you know so little about the system you support.
The current richest person in the world as of time of recording is Jeff Bezos, who has $68.6 billion. He is the former CEO of Amazon. He recently changed his position to some other weird position where he can not be in the limelight, but he's still to do with Amazon. There's another CEO, but he's famous for being the CEO. And he has so much money that when this is written down with lists of zeros, it's meaningless. I just see a line of zeros.
Yeah, it's staggering. People don't realize how much money actually is, and there are popped out a lot of internet sites that try to put this money into perspective, and even then, it's hard to wrap your mind around. It's not just being rich, it's not being very rich, it's being so ridiculously rich that you could not possibly use up that money on under 5 lifetimes.
There's something that fascinates me about this, is that in the modern times, they've figured out a way to make this money, and it is by forming a corporation. And a corporation is like, I like to think of them as little landless countries. They're dictatorships with their own power structure and their own rules. And they sort of act almost in competition to real countries. And they use these to enrich the leaders, the kings of these little countries, the CEOs and the ownership class, to make their money. And the corporations are incredible because they lock themselves into the law, and they really do get their fingers into the legal system of whatever country they're occupying and change the law to suit themselves. They corrupt actual governments in order to get away with abusing workers and destroying the environment in order to increase their own profits. The corporation is such a fascinating construction. It's in the way it functions. It's like little Mordors hassling and threatening actual countries.
Yeah, this is particularly prevalent in American politics, where you have the two-party system and the people giving, what are we calling it? Money for the candidate to spread the word around. Donations, or what's the word I'm after here?
What do they call donations are legalized bribes.
Yeah. That's what it is basically. So
your psychic is working again, because this is my next point. Capitalism is the opposite of democracy.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? That so many people have bought over in the West, including places like Sweden, that somehow capitalism and democracy are compatible. Square that circle for me.
It has to do with the narrative of capitalism again. People are more concerned with the narrative than the actual reality. They don't see the reality because of the narrative being in the way.
It just baffles me that democracy, everyone's supposed to know, is people power. But capitalism is money power, and the idea that it's either the people are in charge or the money is in charge, it literally can't be both. It just can't.
Do you know how many times I've been met with opposition when I pointed this out to people?
It's like saying oil and water. They totally get along.
Yeah, or several times I said that, yeah, but people are not really in charge. People with a lot of money are in charge, and I met with people who they have no idea what they're talking about, who are like, no, that's not true, Christina, you're talking bull. I'm like, excuse me, please look around. It is not rocket science. It is not a conspiracy theory. It is just the truth of the world.
It's a very common trick for, I don't know what it is like where you are, but in America and in Britain, capitalists love to say that they're patriotic and that they love the country of wherever they're in, when they're not loyal to any country. In fact, they're mostly multinational. In fact, if a country dares to even increase their taxes a teensy-weensy little bit, they'll be like, we're leaving the country, we're never coming back.
Yeah, patriotism isn't really a narrative in use in Sweden. It's frowned upon unless you are, if you use it as an argument, you are seen as racist. What we use here instead is some kind of show of benevolence, of helping the people, of being good guy leader.
It's interesting to me where patriotism is basically what democracy, what the right wing thinks democracy is. Like the love of their country and what their country stands for. And it's like, corporations stand for the same things I stand for, apparently. You must be off your goddamn rocker. Because corporations are nothing like you. Their interests are entirely different than yours. So the idea that Jeff Bezos is a patriotic American is just so unbelievably laughable that I could just like keel over and have a seizure right now.
Indeed. I mean, we live in a world where corporations have more rights than people.
And with that, we will be back in a moment. We need to take a break. See you in a minute. Welcome. Thanks for listening to the Free Speech Podcast.
Check in every Saturday for a brand new episode.
If you like the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. It really helps us in the rankings.
If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon to receive full notifications when new episodes are released, and of course, like the video.
Please consider sponsoring us on Patreon. Due to not being based in the USA, our channel is unfortunately not eligible for advertising revenue on the Anchor network.
A small monthly donation will help us cover our costs. Just visit patreon.com/thefreespeechpodcast. Your contribution is greatly appreciated.
And remember to catch us on social media. We're on Twitter @the2peaches.
On Facebook at facebook.com/thefrozenpeaches.
And on Instagram at instagram.com/thefreespeechpodcast.
And back to the show.
Welcome back to the Free Speech Podcast, wherever you're listening, be it on YouTube for the starers or Spotify, etc. for the listeners. We are discussing capitalism. Ah, yes, that system that people usually love, but they really, really should hate. Now, you cannot turn on any even remotely left-leaning news without hearing capitalism and its influence in politics. Do you think, Christina, that capitalism and politics get along?
No.
Why is that?
I mean, we touched upon that before. I mean, democracy and capitalism doesn't get along. If you're asking politics in a more broad spectrum, then I guess capitalism. Yeah. All right. Well, then corporations are employing politics all the time. It's the way they are in power of. It's the way they employ their will upon others. It's through politics.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. But when it comes to democratic politics specifically, money has tended to headbutt it. When I was a bit younger, when I was in school, right, we used to have this teacher who was the religion teacher. But as you can tell, religion was a very important subject to learn, and we used every minute of every day to learn about it, and we didn't sit around talking inanely for most of it. So we were talking inanely instead of learning, and the teacher was like, "Does everyone feel good today?" And we were like, "Kinda." And one girl was like, "I really don't feel good. I want to go shopping." And I was 14. I was like, "Wait, what? What? If you don't feel good, you want to go shopping?" And the teacher was like, "Oh yeah, there's nothing like retail therapy to make yourself feel better. There's nothing like going out and getting yourself something nice for you to feel better."
Huh.
And this stuck with me, right? So whenever I went to the shops afterwards, later in life, I mean, and you would buy something, I was like, this doesn't make me feel better at all. But then I thought, who does it benefit for people to think that? For people to believe that it makes you feel better? And I was like, if I buy myself a chocolate bar, I'm actually contributing to the maintenance and continuation of a system that controls the entire planet.
Yeah, you're contributing to a system that is making you feel bad to start with.
And when I was buying this, I was at Twix. Do you have Twix in Sweden?
Yeah, we do.
And it was actually in an airport. I was waiting for a plane, and I was bringing this up to the cashier, and I was thinking, and I looked at this guy. He's just a worker. He's a normal guy. And I noticed that he had a badge on his shirt that was the badge of the United Kingdom's Labour Party. So this guy was ostensibly an anti-capitalist. And I was thinking, at that moment, I was like, capitalism and politics are always kind of in a low-key war with each other, but capitalism wins.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, what is the point of this? So I went and did some reading. I was about 20 at the time, and I discovered this whole form of capitalism, which is now common parlance, called neoliberalism. The point of neoliberalism was to sort of get back at the way that democracy had started to erode the power of markets and interfere in the power of markets. And it wanted to, for example, effectively install dictatorships. For example, in a lot of South American countries, they would launch neoliberal policies under dictatorships proper. And in democracies, they work to defang the power of government, make sure government took regulations away, make sure they didn't tax them. It was all a big, effectively revenge porn for capitalism, because the neoliberals viewed themselves as having been too disgraced and weakened by democracy. And the funny thing was, they weren't even that much weakened. It was after World War II, when they decided they needed to run the countries in a different way, where they installed healthcare systems and welfare states. They viewed that as an impossible insult. And that's what neoliberalism is. It's like when the day that capitalism declared open war on government, and its guiding principle was, you cannot vote on the market. Have you ever heard of any of this?
Not explicitly in the way you just put forward. Not like in a whole united whole in that kind of sense.
It came from this literally this group of think tanks, and they got together to basically find a way, how can they make the capitalist class dominant beyond question again? And I must stress, they were never not dominant. They resented the little bit of check on them. The teensy weensy little bit they resented and hated.
Yeah.
And it was based on this crazed idea that the ultimate free market. But interestingly, it also considered the state as having a part of protecting and promoting markets. So they weren't like Randroids, the followers of Ayn Rand, who wanted to abolish the government and effectively have anarchy, anarcho-capitalism. They wanted the state to exist in order to promote, control, and, act in favor of free markets and not get in the way. So governments could do stuff as long as it was according to what capitalists wanted. In effect, this was an idea that said capital should dictate to democracy. And effectively, you've abolished democracy.
Yeah, that seems to be exactly how it is.
That's unbelievable in my opinion. Capital attempts to corrupt politics via buying politician. In America, this is legalized under an act called Citizens United, where money is considered free speech, that's insane on the face of it. They use lobbying and legal maneuvers to pay less taxes and to have laws written that are favourable to their interests. That's called a coup.
It is crazy.
So the idea of when people say, capitalism is compatible with democracy, no. Capitalism ate democracy. You don't have a democracy right now, because as we've just shown you, the capital owns your democracy, you pack of idiots.
Yeah, the capital owns you as a person.
Indeed it does.
We are all products within capitalism.
Let's have another quote by one of our economists. David Schweikart wrote, "Ordinary people in capitalist societies are deemed competent enough to select their political leaders, but not their bosses. Contemporary capitalism celebrates democracy, yet denies us our democratic rights at precisely the point where they might be utilised most immediately and concretely, at the place where we spend most of the active and alert hours of our adult lives." Of course, he's referring to your workplace. You spend most of your life in work. You do not spend most of it in public where where the government matters, where the state matters, you spend most of your existence at work under the dictatorship of your private king, your boss.
Yes. And workplaces and corporations really are tiny dictatorships. There's no denying that. If you offend your boss, you can get ready to pack up.
I always find it incredibly strange. It's like, there's this one guy with money, and does it ever trickle into his mind? I don't know whether they do it consciously, but does it ever trickle into their minds where they're like, I can ruin so many people's lives whenever I want to?
Yeah, I suppose it gives them a kick.
Could you ever imagine like those psychopathic types get in there, get like a proper erection just at the idea of that?
Yeah.
No wonder a lot of psychos go on to become big capitalists and bankers and all that sort of thing.
Indeed. This is kind of a side note, but something that kind of just really made me realize how unfair this whole system is. When I had my own company for a while, in the sense that I was selling my services as an artist, and I paid a huge chunk of my income for taxes, and I didn't get a lot of money at all, and probably a little bit more than 50% went to taxes. Now that the issue is that huge corporations that earn a huge amount of money, they get a lot of tax breaks. But me, as the single little individual who started a company in order to make some money based on my artistic skills, I have to pay almost all of it away as taxes. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, your mistake is not owning the government, because you can't just go in and say, well, I don't want to pay taxes. Screw you.
I know, but just take this into account how incredibly backwards that is. I mean, the same percentage of taxes from a very rich dude would go so much further in order to, give money back to the people. I mean, I'm stating the obvious here, but just really think about it and reflect on that for a while. It's absolutely insane.
It's the neoliberal wet dream. The poors cover all the cost of society and you don't have to pay it. But you as a capitalist can still benefit from the roads and things that those tax monies built for nothing.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's just a win-win for them. They're like totally getting off on that.
It is.
Now, to Americans who think that capitalism is patriotic, we're going to hear from two people who were former presidents of America, the US, have a few words about capitalism. Thomas Jefferson said, "I hope we shall crush in its birth the aristocracy of our moneyed corporations, which dare already to challenge our government to a trial of strength and bid defiance to the laws of our country." Now, this was I think he was the third president, and he's already saying exactly what the reality is now. Already, they were trying to control the government. And this was a president of the US. So all you people who think capitalism is patriotic, well, the original founders of America didn't think it was a bloody patriotic, did they? You just heard it from the man himself saying these people are trying to corrupt the government. Let's try another one. Franklin D. Roosevelt, who's very famous for being the one who did the New Deal. And, Bernie Sanders sort of models himself off of Roosevelt. They call him FDR. FDR said, "The liberty of a democracy is not safe if the people tolerate the growth of private power to a point where it becomes stronger than their democratic state itself. That, in its essence, is fascism. Ownership of government by an individual, by a group, or by any other controlling private power." People, do you understand now?
Mm.
Do you agree with the presidents?
Oh, yeah. That was like word porn to me.
And these are American presidents. These aren't communists. Are they going to listen to their presidents? Are they going to listen to capitalists? Come on, America. Come on.
At this point, the narrative is so much stronger than the truth.
It really infuriates me. It's just the truth is so obvious. Why can't you see it, you blind weirdos?
It's crazy.
We got to finish this off. There's one more aspect we should cover, and that is us, the working class, the worthlesses, the nobodies, labor. Capitalism makes its money by making us make stuff or do stuff. And this is sold, right? They sell the stuff we do or make. And after their costs are covered, so whenever they've paid off the price of the making or the doing, the remainder is taken as profit, and a teensy little bit is given to us as wages. The rest is kept by the capitalist, who, by the way, did not make anything.
Indeed.
It's in the interests of the capitalist to reduce the cost of production and to reduce the portion of the profits given to the workers. They take all the value and produce none of the value. Those con artists, those liars, those moochers, parasites. You know, all the things they call the working class on benefits. Well, that's you, capitalists. You're sucking off the teat of the worker like some sort of sick vampire, you piece of crap.
It's such a huge institution of absolute immoral idiots. Ugh.
And the interesting thing is, it's in the interests of labour to fight back and to increase the share of the profits of the products produced. This gave rise to the idea of a union. I want to ask you a few questions about unions because you're from a country that has some interesting relationships with unions. Are you in a union by any chance?
I'm not in a union.
Why not? Is there not a union for artists or?
I'm currently unemployed. That's why.
You can still kind of be in a union. For example, I'm in the National Union of Journalists and I don't work as a journalist. But regardless, it's considered Sweden and co. to have very strong unions. For example, Sweden is known for not having a minimum wage at all because the power of the unions is so great that the average person will get paid way beyond what they would have received if there was a minimum wage because their bargaining power is in greater proportion to that of the capitalist. Do you think that's true?
Well, I gotta admit I don't know all that much about Swedish unions. What I do know is that there is a lot of opposition to this from the right. Mm-hmm. Definitely, they want to abolish or at least diminish the power of unions. And there's a lot of push for this to happen.
You hear this an awful lot recently in America with the debate for the $16 minimum wage, that they always bring up the fact that there is no minimum wage in Sweden because their unions are so damn powerful, while you can't even give us a minimum wage, where in America they've neither got a minimum wage, it's good enough, nor very strong unions. In the UK, of course, Maggie Thatcher destroyed the unions, and unions are very much neutered in Britain, but they're still very powerful in Nordic countries, and their purpose is simple, where together they represent the sum total of workers. And it's kind of like this difference between the alpha capitalist and, sort of being able to hold off everyone getting together and fighting back to him. The more people get together, the more the minority loses against the majority. And the union is a way for the minority to be bound, or the majority to be bound together to fight the rich minority.
Mm.
And it balances the power there where individually, you're just a poor nobody. You have very little bargaining power. There's not much you can do to threaten the capitalist. So you take what he gives you and you shut up about it. But if you all get together, you have much more way of saying, well, none of us will work for you unless you do this. And if none of us work for you, you don't make any money.
Indeed. I mean, in Sweden, we have paid parental leave, paid sick leave. We have a certain amount of days of the year that are, you can take days of work and still get paid on those days.
Mm. You have a lot of social programs. You have a lot of things that can, the government will install certain benefits to support people as human beings. While if it was up to the capitalist in general, they wouldn't give you anything, because things like whether you have a child or whether you need income support or whatever, that's nothing to do with making profit. And as a result, there's no way they'll consider it, because the capitalist system has no method to consider anything other than profit.
No, absolutely not. Take sick leave, for example. I think the system we have is that you do not get paid the first day you are sick, but the rest of the time you get 80%.
Mm-hmm. The way I think to take away here, before we move on to our final point, because we're pushing time a little bit, is the worker generates all the value in capitalism and receives nearly none of it. The capitalist simply owns the means of production and makes all the money. Yeah, if anything is going to stick with you forever, please let it be that.
And you think about it, it seems to be, it's an upside down trend. It seems that the harder you work, the less you get for it. Take, for example, new employers or employees, or what do you call it? I forgot the word I'm after. People who want to try out a job, but they don't get money for it. What is the word for that?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, but we get the idea. Go on.
No, I'm after this specific word.
Anyway, we don't have time for you to go looking for the specific word.
Okay, whatever. The more you work, the less you get for it, pretty much. As you get the experience and advance in a company, it seems that the trend seems to be that you get less things to actually do on-hand labor. You start to manage a lot of other people, but you do less on-hand labor. So it's associated with the more you do with your own skills, the less money you earn.
It's almost like the higher you go up on the corporate ladder, the less actual value you produce.
Indeed.
Anyways, we got to go on to the solution to all this, because we didn't just spend 50 minutes bad-mouthing the living crap out of capitalism for nothing. And because we wish to redefine capitalism, we want social capitalism. What do you think that is, Christina? Give me one of your gut reactions.
The money that capitalism generates goes back to the people and not into the pockets of rich dudes.
Yeah, but more so, a social capitalism, if you think of it, is a contained capitalism. It's a capitalism which has very well-defined limits. In a meritocratic society, the state is supreme. The meritocratic state run by experts is supreme. And the state covers basic amenities such as electricity, water, etc. It can be summed up as the state takes care of everyone's bottom rungs of Maslow's hierarchy. Your housing, your food, your basic needs. All of that is guaranteed as a member of society. Unlike current capitalism, electricity, water, etc. aren't commodities. In current capitalism, they're owned by private people and sold. But they're still necessary for human life. And they're owned by people that have no duty whatsoever to other humans. Their only duty is to profit. And that's an absolute ridiculous imbalance there. That's like a gun to your head, where you need water, you need food. And therefore they guarantee a market by effectively threatening you with death. And that's not acceptable. In a social capitalism, markets will all be about culture, fulfillment, and pleasure. People will buy more art, for example. It will be about buying things that enrich your life experience, but they do not threaten your life if you don't have them. What do you think?
Yep.
And there's some places already where, for example, some countries, I don't know about Sweden, is your water privately or publicly owned?
I'm not sure about the water, but electricity is.
In communism, nearly everything is publicly owned. There's no markets at all.
Oh, I mean, electricity is privately owned, at least most of it, as far as I'm aware.
There's lots of things where it's a mix in most countries at the moment. Some things are privately owned, some things are publicly owned. Whenever a right-wing government is, they try and sell more off. And whenever there's a left-wing government in, they try and nationalize more.
Yeah. I was going to say that Sweden has a lot of things like that, where it's very much a mix between public and private.
In a social capitalism, all of that would be run by the state. But all of the stuff we'd associate with innovation and things like that, which perhaps won't work so well, like in communism, for example, the art market controlled by the government seems a bit strange. It doesn't seem flexible enough to function properly. In a social capitalism, all those amenities will be owned by the government, but the market will be all about creativity. And it will be all about experiences and enrichment. It could be summarized by the philosophy, small is beautiful. We want many small creative businesses, and the state will be in a position where to grant subsidies and to encourage small businesses. It will be interested in your talents going somewhere, in which case, but there shouldn't be a point where you have to like panic and think, if I lose this here job, I will lose everything. That's unacceptable. The market is all about enrichment. It's not about survival. It will be regulated by the maximum wage, a simple and fair tax system, along with the 100% inheritance tax. If you're going to think of it as anyway, I want you to think of it as a contained free market. A free market that is very well defined and bound so that you can't be screwed by it.
You know, a surprisingly relevant oh god, English is kind of running out of my mind today. A surprisingly relevant example of that is that we have a couple of, like virtual chat programs like Second Life and IMVU. They operate on a weird system that kind of like creative capitalism, where you have a system where pretty much anyone, usually if you pay a certain amount of upfront fee, you're allowed to become a content creator for this virtual world and earn real life money on that. And this is an interesting idea because it's exactly that. It's this idea, but tweaked to work in the real world. And
that kind of sounds so that the owners of the app would still be skimming off profits from you've created.
Exactly. That's what I was coming to. The issue is that it's still owned by a private company and they are in charge of how much you are able to earn on your own products, even if they give you the opportunity. But this is the model. The point I'm getting at is that you can look at this model and strip away the problems and really tweak it, and you can easily see how that would create such a better world, basically, if everyone is given the opportunity and freedom to create and to bring their own ideas to the table, then there is no way that we wouldn't advance.
Of course, just in the way that governments currently interfere and promote big capitalism, in a social capitalism, the government would be interested in promoting everyone's little markets. It would be interested in promoting as many people having their own small businesses as possible. And it would provide services that allow you to advertise, and it would give you grants to advertise. You would be liberated from that crippling need to have staggering amounts of investment capital. For example, let's take this idea, for example. Let's even be conservative about it. Let's say you're given a state loan. If you're set up a business, if your business succeeds, you pay that loan back. If it doesn't, you don't pay that loan back. you will not take a massive financial hit if your idea doesn't go off. And that's even saying that we don't even have to have that loan paid back. We're being purposely conservative. That even if the state would demand it back, it would still be better off. Or if your business does not take off, you would not be destitute. While currently, you take a serious risk starting your own business. If it goes wrong and you've taken out a loan from a bank, you still owe that back whether you make any money or not. So if you don't make any money, you could be totally screwed.
Yep.
Business has to promote the humanity. It has to enhance humanity. And as a result, you can't hold a gun to someone's head when they're trying to push an innovative idea. And that's the point is, big business can afford to take these risks. Normal people can't. And as a result, you're effectively strangling small business. A social capitalism would make them flourish.
And this goes in hand with inheritance. People who have inherited a lot of money from the parents or are getting funds from the parents, they are able to take this risk, while poor people are not.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for paying attention to what was a difficult podcast to narrativize. And it wasn't as much of a fun topic as making fun of weird kings. It was very facty and cerebral, but it was a very important topic and one that I really hope stays with you because it's vital that the average person understands the basics of these things.
Indeed, this is very much the basics. There is so much more to talk about this, to get into the nitty-gritty of why capitalism works, doesn't work, sorry. Really point out the obvious issues here that actually might not be that obvious to some people. But we're just talking about the very big picture of it and why it's kind of an issue.
It's a bloody abomination and it needs to be sorted out. Sweet.
Yep.
So, thanks for that, and we will all be having a bit more fun now after the break, where we will be responding to random crap we found on the internet. Please buckle up for that back in a moment. Internet is a terrible place and it is filled by terrible, disgusting people. And every now and again, you get one that's all right. So we're going to be reacting to some stuff we found on the internet, and we might agree, disagree, condemn, make fun of, or simply be aghast by. So up first, we have a tweet by someone called Jason Hickle. It is better to imagine the end of capitalism than the end of the world. True?
Are you saying that it's easier to imagine the end? No, wait.
It's better. It's preferable that we get over our weird love affair with capitalism
sorry,
than it is to let capitalism kill us all.
I mixed it up in my head. I know that there are similar talking points that people say that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism.
But the interesting thing is capitalism is driving us to the end of the world because of climate change. So
I think that's the point, yes.
I would have rephrased it differently as it's necessary that you imagine the end of capitalism or you will end up with the end of the world. And
Indeed.
I love people who are like, I would rather let the world end than get rid of capitalism. I was like, okay, you have a strange death fetish, my friend.
Or people who think that the capitalism will save us from the end of the world. Well, who put us here? I do wonder.
They probably blame the communist deep state or something. Now,
yeah.
Somebody commented on this. Not a lot wrong with capitalism as a system. The only alternative, communism, has been adequately shown not to work. What is very wrong is the corrupted form of capitalism that exists at present, especially in the UK. What do you think?
What I think is that I hate this idea that we only have two options. It's either capitalism or communism.
It's just
so
wrong.
tiring. It's so tiring. We literally have an infinite amount of other options. We just have to come up with them.
I can think of like six off the top of my head.
I mean, if we accept it that we only have two options, then you have already just makes me so mad. Okay,
I can just
People
imagine
who say
like,
that we are if you are an idiot like this that believe we have no other options than capitalism or communism, you are dumb and I hate you. Okay, just putting it out there. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I just imagine like China standing up like, am I a joke to you?
This annoys me so much. How stupid and uncreative and dull can you be?
But this exposes a common misunderstanding where he says here at the end, what is very wrong is the corrupted form of capitalism. What he is actually referring to is a myth called crony capitalism. And they try and separate the fact, they say it's the strange relationship between government and the capitalist elite, as if it's to do with cronies, they're together. The problem is they wrongly diagnose that as being a corruption of capitalism, when in reality, the relationship between the state and the capitalist is a natural, logical result of the assumptions of capitalism.
I know, it's crazy.
And it just proves that they don't understand even the fundamentals. They could probably learn a lot by listening to our podcast.
Yeah.
Just to learn some of the basic ABCs, because clearly all these internet economists don't know jack about it.
It's crazy. It makes me so annoyed to think about all these arguments from people that I've heard. That it makes me so mad. I want to twist their necks off. Yes.
Next tweet by someone called Misha Cross. Saying that sex workers or strippers, etc., only want your money is really funny. You ever got your hair cut or your car fixed? Sorry to break it to you, but people who provide the service also only want your money. Because, it's a job.
Yep. Yeah, that's indeed. That's really funny.
I find this whole opposition to the sex industry to be one of the most offensive things ever. Because, one, if you like history, you know that the sex industry is the oldest industry humans have ever done. So it's like you're like besmirching an ancient tradition, especially to conservatives. That should be incredibly offensive. How dare you disgrace our past like that? How dare you insult the prostitutes that have been holding up this economy since we invented the economy? Don't you love business, you stupid conservatives?
Yeah, I mean, their issues can be summed up with the simple single word of misogyny.
It's just so funny where it's like, they believe it. We'll make money no matter what, because we believe in capitalism. Women make money using the natural commodities they have to sell. You can't do that, that's really bad.
Yeah, on the other hand, I will say that the main profit that sex workers make also come from a place of misogyny. That's a complicated issue, and we could talk about this.
I think the concept is also combined with the idea of you work with what you have and the skills that you have. And that is how you generate value until arbitrarily it isn't. And they're effectively saying that sex work is work. And work should be it should be legal to begin with. It should be regulated. For example, let's put pimps out of business. And they should have unions, and they should otherwise be a job, a type of hospitality job, and they're professionals in that job. Yeah,
but this is very complicated. The issue of sex work is very complicated, and there's a lot more to be said about it than this.
There's also a lot of different types in it.
Yeah, there is. It's much more complicated, and if we really want to tackle this, we should get more in depth with it, because there are a lot of issues with overall, and there's a lot of things that need to be solved before we can comfortably make it a legal and natural part of work, I guess.
The pandemic has created a big boon in a certain type of sex work, that being the cam work, where it's very different to prostitution in that you're selling the images of yourself, and sort of it's also attached to like the OnlyFans sort of economy that is generated. It's like, this is like pandemic sex, where you can have the sex without the sex. I am sure there are postmodernists out there who are like eye rolling at the sight of that. But like, this has turned into a whole economy of its own, and it's like they're all self-employed and they're all like under the thumb of whatever site they're on. So for example, OnlyFans or whatever cam site they're on all takes a cut of the profits that they make for the show they put on, which I think is kind of disgusting. It's their body, but they should keep the money.
I will say that the model of self-employment that OnlyFans has provided seems to be the best model yet. I mean, I'm not saying that OnlyFans should take the cut. I'm just saying that to create a platform for sex workers to be self-employed and I think that's very important, right? I think it's very important for sex workers to be self-employed. That's kind of the gist of what I'm getting at. Because Germany, it has legal sex work, but there are a lot of issues there. There are not enough social programs in place to protect sex workers. But if you're self-employed, you have an easier time to protect yourself.
You also don't have anyone to help protect you if you've literally no security guard there to.
That as well. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm really not saying that. As I said, this is a complicated issue and we should get in depth if we really want to tackle this.
Next tweet. A post by someone called Joel Osteen. I adore the witless morons on the right who think Joe Biden is going to bring them communism. Joe Biden is going to bring communism like libertarianism is going to bring prosperity for most people. Do you think Joe Biden is a closet communist, Christina?
Oh God, the delusion of the right. Oh, it's almost cute.
They seem totally oblivious to the fact that Joe Biden is a moderate conservative.
They don't know what communism is. It's just that communism is things that are bad. Communism is something that I don't like, but they don't know what communism is. They have no clue.
This is a good jumping point to one of my favorite topics. This is an example of what I call language abuse, where you take certain words and the people don't know the real meaning of them, but they associate them with strong emotions. So communism brings up bad feels in the Americans, but patriotism brings up good feels, and they're totally oblivious to both of them.
It's flabbergasting because most of the time when I hear people say, oh, this and this, that's communism, like the arguments they employ against communism is effectively arguments against capitalism. And it's absolutely fascinating that they don't see that, they don't realize that they are in fact not talking about communism. When I've so often heard people talk about, it's profit over quality, it's selling crap and saying that, that's communism, that's stupid communism, it ruins everything sucks. That's capitalism, my dude.
I always wondered, do actual communists like sit there and be like, no one actually asks us what we think?
There are very few actual communists left, I think.
They haunt certain Facebook groups and they're usually very meme-centric.
Yeah, I know, but they are few and far between. I know, I mean, it's, I don't know, I'm just absolutely fascinated by how people actually have no idea what they are talking about, and they are so proud of it too. Like, they are proud of over being absolutely clueless. It's scary.
It's effectively, I can't remember who said it, but they say, communism is bad things, capitalism is good things. That is all. And God, ignorance is bliss. These people are so simple. It's just everything about them is about feelings.
Yeah,
the words that makes it feel good.
These people say that communism is when one person takes the profit that many people generate. That again, what they think communism is actually what capitalism is. Their arguments against communism is arguments against capitalism. It's fascinating how effective this whole propaganda machine against communism has been. It has been an absolute success story when people think that communism is the actual system that they are living under, and they don't see it. It allows for this enormous Trojan horse to just be let in with welcome doors.
Next and final post. There was a post said this: arguing with an ignorant person is like telling a stop sign to change its mind. No matter what logic you have, it won't understand, nor will it agree with you, and it will say the exact same thing when you're done talking. Therefore, you lose for the simple fact you engaged with it in the first place. Thoughts?
Yep. Yes, that took me a while to learn. Indeed, I have become so frustrated so many times over people who simply don't get it. And conclusion is everybody sucks, everybody's an idiot, I hate everyone, good night.
The right-wingers especially have this strange thing where they will engage you in a debate, but it is in a bad faith debate. There is absolutely no intent of going into it and achieving the right answer.
Indeed.
It is simply about winning. They're not even considering what you're saying. The intention is not there even from the beginning. So it's literally a pointless exercise. It's a show trial, effectively.
Absolutely. I've been there. I learned it the hard way.
Do you think we have developed a serious problem with arguing in bad faith?
We have.
Is this, I don't know whether the internet has just made this more apparent. Has this always been like this, or has it genuinely gotten worse?
I mean, that was one of my main takeaways from studying philosophy and argumentation and all that, is that the realization hits you that almost none of the arguments, political arguments, are ever based on actual logical structures. It's rhetoric. It's very much rhetorical. There's very, very little actual rationality in that. And when you learn that and when you see that, the world is a scary place, basically.
But it's not that they're just bad at logic. It's not that they're just uneducated. It's that they disregard it entirely.
Yes, absolutely.
And they could potentially be incredibly well versed in this, but they've just decided, nah, not important, ignoring it.
Absolutely. And that's because people have a tendency to make decisions based on emotions rather than what's actually logical. And that's why rhetoric is sadly a more powerful tool, because it speaks to people's emotions. And emotions are so much easier to manipulate because logic is logic. It follows a set of rules and the answer is the right one. But emotions are not like that. And that's very dangerous. It really is. Even if your intentions are pure, it's so easily to be misled.
It's also interesting. This is an overwhelmingly right-wing problem. The left still does it, but it's 99.9% the right wing.
Yep.
And there is a question, and I'm not entirely sure to what degree it's true, is how much is Donald Trump responsible for that? That he introduced this idea that truth is irrelevant. And there is no point in looking for it because the truth can be whatever you want it to be.
Oh, I don't think he introduced it. I just think that he normalized it.
Or popularized it.
Yes.
Like I always knew, for example, liars and grifters have always existed, but it really does feel like they've become myriad in such a short number of years that,
yes,
like back, I remember, and I'm not even that old, but I remember there was a time whenever right-wingers had to try and sound like they knew what they were talking about. And when they went on to the news, they had to, you know, they disguised their stupidity up in at least the language of economics or something. They had to sound like they had a clue. No, they don't. They just literally dismiss an opposing opinion outright. And they just say, nope, mine is true. I don't have to justify it. True because I say so there.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they like the mumbling, absolutely incompetent idiot that is Donald Trump, because they relate to him, because they are also mumbling, incompetent idiots. And it's absolutely scary that this is actually successful. It's not okay that this has been allowed to happen. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane.
It was a factor when I was considering creating this podcast, was that there is a voice that says, what's the point? Even if we, for example, imagine this. Imagine there was a rule that made every single person in the world listen to this podcast. Just how many would actually listen to what we're saying? Even if, like, imagine they had to have heard it.
Way less than 1%.
It just makes you feel like even if we had success, we'd have failure. It's like we could reach everyone in the world and yet reach very few at the same time, because they would not consider our arguments in good faith. They would not consider what we had to say. They would instantly dismiss it because they didn't like the feel of it. And what can you do about that? And yeah, I don't have an answer to that.
You know, what I worry about, and this is like a personal worry of mine, if I'm feeling off, like today I was feeling off, I felt like I didn't really get my arguments or my points across in a good way, I was losing track of my thoughts. It feels like you usually only get one chance. If you are off one day and you don't really manage to articulate your thoughts in the correct manner, even if you manage to correct that later on, that if people oppose you, they will just keep bringing that up.
Oh, do you mean that they will look for a non-substantial reason to discredit you?
Yeah, like I made a mistake once, and even if I corrected that mistake, then that single mistake will be enough to hold on to and discredit. I'm not necessarily talking about myself, but it was just like I felt a bit off today, so I'm afraid that people will hate me. But also just a general trend.
Those are another. It's not exactly the point, but it's a related point that if you can't listen to the truth and debate honestly, in order to win, you rely on rhetorical tricks, and one of those is to focus on something irrelevant, blow it out of proportion, and effectively take the straw man argument to the nth degree and beat the person over the head with something that was an irrelevant error that really is just a distraction technique from them engaging on the substance. Like, for a good example of this is the previous one. Just say Joe Biden is a communist. It's like, no, it's not. But the point is, if you just keep calling him that, you're totally distracting from actually debating the policies. So if you can just pick something irrelevant, you can use that as a rhetorical baseball bat to never have to trouble yourself with actually arguing properly.
Indeed. I think people should just get educated on logical fallacies, because people employ them all the time. Strawman arguments, ad hominem, slippery slope. This is regular things that people use all the time and think that they are actual valid rational tools in argumentation, whereas they are not. And ad hominem is not an argument against the point. It is just not.
In the current culture, if you actually somehow, if you're a very clever politician and you manage to install sort of, these the training in logical argument in school, in this current culture, even if you did teach it, how many of them would give a toss? How many of them would even take it on board? Would they not just carry on as if it doesn't exist?
I don't know. I mean, I can say that I've taken it on board and have made an effort to use them to double check my own arguments and to see where others' arguments may have issues. But that's me.
Well, our listeners or viewers could, in the comment sections, perhaps, are you an optimist or a pessimist? Would educating people on logical fallacies work instantly, or would we have to counter deeper cultural issues.
I would have to say that even if it wouldn't work instantly, which it probably wouldn't, because we still have old people who don't employ these double checks on their arguments, but it's still a better option than to not teach it at all. That I will say.
All right, I think that's enough for one day. Thanks so much for watching, and we will be back next Saturday. I'm Niall, and I'm with Christina, and this was the Freeze Peach Podcast.